Okay, we'll go ahead and call this Twila City Planning Commission meeting to order this Wednesday, August 23rd, 2023 at the hour of 7 p.m. here at City Council Chambers. First item on our agenda here is our Pledge of Allegiance. If you please rise.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Second item on our agenda is our roll call. Commissioner Hammer?
Here.
Commissioner Proctor?
Here.
Commissioner Sloan?
Here.
Commissioner Dunn?
Here.
Commissioner Jensen?
Here.
Commissioner Goches?
Present.
Please recognize Commissioner Newell. Please excuse Commissioners Robinson. Recognize Council Members Hanson, Manzione, staff members Hanson, Agard, Cook, and Ms. Potter, and Mr. Baker.
So we don't have Catherine here, so
Yes.
identify ourselves.
Yes, and our minutes taker, Catherine, is not here, so if you'll please identify yourselves, just make her life easier. I'm sure she could handle it, but we like to make her job easy. So, number 3 on our agenda here is a public hearing and a decision on a conditional use permit request by Darwin Cook to authorize the use of public use for a restroom facility on 1.35 acres of property located at 44 West, 520 South, the MUG Mixed Use General Zoning District. Mr. Agard.
Thank you, Commissioners. This application for a conditional use permit is located or proposed for the property highlighted in red on the aerial photograph. It rests on the property north of the Gopher Foods Little Mountain Car Wash, and you have the old Glowing Embers restaurant to the east, which is now going to be a daycare, and there will be a small auto dealership operating out of that structure as well. And then 50 West runs north to south on the west side of the property. Property zone mixed use general, and within the mixed use general zone, parks and improvements to parks are permitted under the category of a public use. And in this case, a public use requires the conditional use permit. The Parks Department is proposing the addition of a restroom facility located at the southwest corner of the park, adjacent to the parking lot. And then this is the facility as it would appear, fairly simple structure. And one story, two facilities in it. And that's the request from the Parks Department, just to put the restroom facility in this park. This item does require a public hearing. We did send out notices to property owners within 200 feet, and I did not receive any comments concerning this application. So if you have any questions, I can answer those for you. Mr. Cook is also here and prepared to answer any questions you might have as well. So.
All right, perfect. Let's bring this back to the commission for any questions or comments. Seeing none, this item does require a public hearing. So I'll go ahead and open the public hearing at this time. If you would, please approach the podium, state your name for the audio record, and write your name for the spelling of the record. Might spell my name all there.
The spelling of the record.
Yep, spelling of the record. Okay, seeing no one approach, I'll go ahead and close the public hearing on this particular item. Bring it back to the commission for any other further questions or comments. All right, I'll entertain a motion on item number 3 on our agenda.
Mr. Chair, I move that we approve the conditional use permit requested by Darwin Cook, representing Twila City, to authorize the use of public use on property located at 44 West, 520 South, application number P23-803, based on the findings and subjects to the conditions listed in the staff report dated August 15th, 2023.
I have a motion to approve this conditional use permit from Commissioner Goches. Do I have a second?
A second.
We'll give that one to Commissioner Proctor. All right, Commissioner Hammer, how do you vote?
Aye.
Commissioner Proctor?
Aye.
Commissioner Sloan?
Aye.
Commissioner Dunn?
Aye.
Commissioner Jensen?
Aye.
Commissioner Goches?
Aye.
I'm Chairman Hamilton. I also vote aye. That one passes 7-0. There you go, Darwin.
You put some cameras on that puppy? Thank you.
Number 4 on our agenda tonight is a public hearing and recommendation on amendments to Twila City Code 7-16-4, Table of Development Standards regarding maximum building height for storage structures in an industrial zoning district. Amendments proposed by Twila City. Mr. Agard.
Thank you, Commissioner Hamilton. This text amendment has come to us at the request of one particular company in the industrial zone. They petitioned the city administration to consider this, and the city administration asked staff to move this text amendment through the process. What they're requesting is the increasing of maximum building height for structures involving the storage of materials, silos and tanks and things. Currently, the industrial zone permits a maximum building height of 70 feet, and that is for all structures, buildings or storage and so forth. What we are proposing with this ordinance amendment is that silos and tanks and other similar storage structures be permitted a maximum height of 100 feet. So the ordinance amendment proposes the addition of one note on the in the table of development standards, as you can see, and it just says see note H. And then note H basically states that the storage can only be of non-flammable or non-hazardous materials, requires a conditional use permit, can be 100 feet high as measured to the midpoint of pitch or to the top of the wall, whichever is greater, and that it must be, the request must be approved by the Tooele City Fire Department as part of their conditional use permit. That is the nature of the request and the proposed amendment. Geofortis actually did provide some graphics to show how a 100-foot tall storage silo would look. This is the facility as it appears currently with 70-foot tall silos. And you can see the pink one being the 100-foot tall silo. It's a big building, but not as imposing as I thought it may have been. And then there's another image as seen from Utah Avenue. You can see the Geofortis facility, and then the addition of the 100-foot tall storage silo. That is what is being proposed. It would only apply to the industrial zone. It would not apply to the light industrial or the industrial service or the Tooele City Business Park, just the industrial zones. And then I thought I had included a zoning map. Maybe I didn't. But the industrial zones are located on the west end of the city and the northwest end of the city where the old landfill is. So those are the areas that could be affected by this 100-foot tall storage silo if this ordinance amendment were to be approved by the city council ultimately. So that's what's being requested. I don't see anybody here from Geofortis tonight, but if you have any questions, I can try to answer them for you.
All right, let's bring this back to the commission for questions or comments.
Mr. Chair, I've got a
Commissioner
question.
Goches?
I just see the fire department review asks a question, but it doesn't answer it. It says, how does the fire department achieve emergency access at the top of a 100-foot tall structure?
So when I bring up new applications with the fire chief and the fire marshal every Monday morning and ask for their feedback. And in that meeting, they express some concerns with these taller structures of how do they get up there if they need to get up there to help somebody who may be having a heart condition or having a heart problem or something, or other emergency. And there really wasn't an answer. And it's a good question. It's one that they don't have an answer for right now. Maybe Commissioner Jensen can address that better. But
I've talked to Chief McCoy about this a little bit, and that's kind of what he told me, the same thing, how he feels about it. It's hard to, I think one of the bigger, I don't know if it's a problem necessarily, but our department, we have a couple of rope rescue people that are certified to the technician level, but it's just a couple of them. It's not a lot. I mean, our department's not like Salt Lake City's department. We don't have dedicated heavy rescue people, designated high angle rescue people, things like that. So it would be a challenge for the fire department. It could be a challenge for the fire department in certain situations. We do have a ladder that's a 120-foot stick, I believe, if I can remember right. But that doesn't mean we can get up 120 feet, because when you set up a ladder truck, you have to be out of the collapse zone. The ladder's at an angle, so it's not like the ladder truck wouldn't necessarily be able to reach the top possibly depend on what's around the bottom of it and things like that, so. But I don't really have an answer either.
Good question. It is a good question. Any other further questions for staff on this one? This is just a recommendation for us, so if the city council needs to dive into this deeper, then we can do that. But they heard our question too, and I'm sure they have the same concerns. All right, any other questions from the commission for staff? All right, this one does require a public hearing. I'll go ahead and open the public hearing on the amendments to Tooele City Code 7-16-4. If you would please state your name for the record and write your name for the record. Seeing no one approach, I'll go ahead and close the public hearing on this particular item and bring it back to the commission for any other further questions or comments.
Got a question.
Yes, Commissioner Sloan.
Roger, this question's probably for you. And based on the limited information we have from the fire department on their ability to service something this high, and I appreciate what you have told us. You don't know what you don't know.
Yeah.
And every one of these would be different. What kind of liability is the city looking at if we pass an ordinance like that without the ability, hypothetically, to service the people there?
Right, key word being hypothetically. There are any number of hypotheticals, and I don't have an answer for them. I can't quantify the potential city liability for this. I do know that the proposal attempts to mitigate liabilities by requiring that the silos contain only verified non-flammable materials, and the fire department would have to verify that. Because flammable, that word can mean a lot of things. It can mean explosive, it can mean incendiary, it can mean smoldering. So the fire department would have to advise Andrew's department whether it meets the ordinance. That's the best we can do. I understand that the fire department does not think they could service the top of that structure if they had to. The assumption being they wouldn't have to because it's not going to burn. That's the best I can do.
Well, I appreciate that, but let's use the scenario that was just given, a medical emergency at the top. That's not subject to that particular oversight, but.
Helicopter. And that's not tongue-in-cheek either.
No, I'm sure it's not. I'm looking at a friend in the audience that's had a cardiac issue, and I'd hate to have him sitting up there waiting for something when we can't get to him.
May I add something?
Please.
I think part of it being a conditional use permit, depending on the design that comes back in, we could possibly add something like a personnel access to get up there, a ladder on the outside, or a stairwell that wraps up, because I think the one that they showed on one of the previous pictures had a manway that went up on the photograph. But I think there is ways to mitigate some of those concerns. And I think if it was, like we said, non-flammable and non-hazardous materials, and that would rely heavily on the fire department, because what necessarily is hazardous, when we're cutting concrete, now the silica and the dust is hazardous. We're supposed to mitigate that as we're cutting concrete. That's some of what I do for a living, So where's the line in the hazardous materials as well, which I guess would be something that the fire department would have to decide at that point for when the application came in of what they were going to store. So there's different levels of hazards and different levels of flammability.
And they would still have to apply for a conditional use permit, so it's going to come back to us anyway.
Yeah, so we would be able to hopefully mitigate some of that with some extra things maybe.
Conditions.
Yeah, just a thought.
No, it's a great thought, great discussion. Any other thoughts on that one? All right. Any other questions? It's a good discussion. People's safety is important to us, and we want to make sure we can mitigate those issues for sure, so that's good. Let's bring this back to the condition for further action here.
I'll make a motion for a positive recommendation. Moving for a positive recommendation to the City Council for Twila City Industrial Height Text Amendment Request by Twila City for the purpose of permitting the maximum building height of 100 feet in the industrial zone for specific storage structures based on the findings, whatever findings there may be in the future staff report or as comes up in the conditional use permit.
Okay, I have a positive recommendation from Commissioner Proctor. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
A second from Commissioner Jensen. Commissioner Hammer, how do you vote?
Aye.
Commissioner Proctor?
Aye.
Commissioner Sloan?
No.
Commissioner Dunn?
Aye.
Commissioner Jensen?
Aye.
Commissioner Goches?
A point of clarification, please.
Yes, please.
So do we have to list those findings? Do we have to define what we are looking for?
I think we have to do that in a conditional use permit, but not a recommendation. So this was going to go up to the City Council, so.
Okay. Aye.
Okay. I am Chairman Hamilton. I also vote aye. This one passes 6-1. I'm pretty sure the explanation is the conditional use permit. Is that going to help you out, Commissioner Sloan?
I'll let you know when we see the conditional
Okay,
use permit.
perfect. Thank you. That one's a positive recommendation. Heading up to the City Council for further discussion. Of course, they heard our discussion today, so they will take it into consideration as well. Thank you, guys. I appreciate you. Number 5 on our agenda tonight is a recommendation on a request for a deviation from the multifamily residential design guidelines for townhomes and Mountain View development in the MUG Mixed Use General Zone by Hamlet Homes. Mr. Agard.
Thank you, Commissioners. This is a little bit of a unique request. Bear with me as I explain it. If you have any questions, happy to try to answer them for you. I don't see the applicant here. You're not the applicant. Okay. All right. So the owner of the Towns at Mountain View, this is the little townhouse development on the south end of town, just south of the Gopher Foods, there next to 50 West. It's got the roads already constructed, all the utilities are in. They are ready to start building. However, they are having some issues in regards to the city's requirement that 60% of the exterior of the structure be either stone or brick. And these are the elevations that were approved. As you can see, those elevations have quite a bit of brick. They also meet all the standards of the ordinance for roof line articulation, for relief on the front and rear facades. It's a very nice looking proposal. It's one that staff worked very hard with the applicant to come to. And here's another view of that structure. And then the side views. There is a considerable amount of stone on there. The total stone coverage for those buildings is 69%. And they met the ordinances at the time, and they still meet the ordinance as it's written today. They, however, want to have a deviation of design standards to eliminate that stone requirement in favor of another exterior product. They're proposing fiber cement siding, board and batten siding, and shake siding and so forth, which you do see commonly on multifamily structures now and residential structures, single-family residential structures as well. However, our ordinance is very specific. It must have 60% of the facade in either brick or stone, which they currently comply with. So they could pull a building permit tomorrow and start building their structures. They're that close. But they would like to request a deviation. So the way that the deviation works under our ordinance, and that's found in Twila City Code 7-11A-25, a request for a deviation is the responsibility of the applicant. The applicant has to make the request in writing, and then they have to basically convince the Planning Commission and then the City Council that this is a request, the deviation is worthy of being granted because it serves a community purpose. And so the applicant has to make that request. That's not a request that is pitched by staff. It's not one that's pitched by the Planning Commission. It's not one that's pitched by the City Council. The applicant has to do that. And then in order to qualify for a deviation, they have to meet 3 of the criteria. Some of these criteria relate to perhaps they have an excess of landscaping beyond what's required. Perhaps they provide a public amenity that can be utilized by residents of the city. Perhaps they are doing some kind of public improvement that benefits the city as a whole. Again, the applicant needs to demonstrate that. And then there has to be 5 findings found that demonstrate that the deviation meets community standards, doesn't create hardships for adjacent properties, and basically just benefits the city and does not create any impacts. I don't see the applicant here tonight, and I'm not going to make that pitch. So that's what's being requested, and I turn it over to the Planning Commission to decide what you want to do with it.
All right, let's bring this back to the commission for any questions or comments.
Mr. Chair, this was an item that was brought up in work meeting. There was a discussion. I don't know if the city council wants to comment on. Did you?
Okay, he's going to correct me if I say it wrong, apparently. We were not in favor of making an exception based on the fact that we've had several people come and ask for exceptions that we had denied previously. But we did talk about revisiting the ordinance as a whole, if that was something they wanted to pursue, to see if there was, if we needed to change the ordinance or not. We didn't really get further into if we needed to or not, but that was something that we would, I know speaking for myself, I would rather look at changing the ordinance as a whole if it needs to be changed rather than making exceptions.
Agreed. I think we both agreed on that. It was split a little bit, but yeah.
It's almost like we've heard this one before too, a couple times.
You might hear it again. There's other applicants out there that are balking at the same requirement.
And they're talking about, I mean, part of their sales pitch was that with the price of homes that have gone down a little bit, the brick requirements making them not with what it costs them to build them, not the brick, the stone or whatever. Our requirement was making them more money than they could sell them for. They're going to lose money on their, that was their sales pitch to us at the council at our work meeting.
Or that they weren't, they
Yeah,
weren't going to make
basically.
as much money.
The question I always ask on these types of requests, if a townhouse costs $400,000 because of the brick and the stone, and let's say that brick and stone, it costs the developer $20,000 to put that on the building. Now the cost is $380,000. Does it suddenly become affordable? Not for me.
Don't ask Chris.
No.
None of it's affordable. If this is the problem, this is not the answer. Yeah.
Mr. Chair, do you have another question
Yes,
for staff?
Commissioner Goches.
The applicant was notified that this item was on the agenda.
Oh yeah, after the city council, I asked him if he wanted to move forward with this, after the council had advised him of the way they were feeling about the deviation, and he says, yeah, I do. I says, well, I've got it queued up for next Wednesday's planning commission. And so, yeah, he knows. I talked to him about it.
And I have one other question, if that's
Yes.
okay. You know, we did have an applicant that came to us with a similar proposition. It was the Lexington Greens, Mr. Ackerlow. And we did change the city ordinance for the facade. Do you recall what it was before? Like, did these
Yes.
these represent the findings since it's been changed? And that's been within a year.
Yeah, so when Mr. Ackerlow came before you, the ordinance at the time, it was very similar in the total amount. It required 60% of the facade, but it required that 75% of the 60% be included on the front facade. And Mr. Ackerlow at the time, he had a legitimate argument. He was stating we can't meet that requirement because we can't put enough brick on the front of the building to meet the 75% of the total brick on the front facade. And so the Planning Commission and City Council changed the ordinance to reduce it on the front facade to 60%, which they were able to meet.
Okay, so this represents a change that we've already modified.
Good information too. Good reminder. Yes, Commissioner Sloan.
For a little historical lesson, I was actually standing about where Mr. Goches is sitting tonight when we're going to call them the pretty codes, just in honor of Councilman Wardle, when they were instigated many, many years ago. And my argument that night was about a housing affordability problem. I did quick math in my head that night and figured we just added $20,000 to the price of every home in the city that was built. I understood at the time why Councilman Wardle wanted to do that. It was based on the appearance essentially of one large subdivision within the city. And it's been a hill for developers and builders to climb for a decade and a half. That said, at the time that it was written, our options were few as far as materials. We had brick, we had rock. We had very little masonry beyond stucco. In that 15 years or so since then, there's some amazing product out there that makes for a nice, attractive product that was what Councilman Gordle was trying to get across. We didn't want trashy-looking subdivisions, for lack of a better term, at the time. And this certainly solved that, but time has allowed that to become a limit. So I would, and when the time is ripe, I probably would be inclined to make a motion that we not support this particular item, but that we do a deep dive into the ordinance and let's update the ordinance so that future folks can use some of these cool new materials that fit what we were trying to do back then, and taking the affordability out of it. But we can give some developers and some builders some options by changing the ordinance and exploring that rather than doing spot deviations in the existing ordinance, if that makes any sense.
So if I'm hearing you right, Commissioner Sloan, you'd like to send a negative recommendation with the caveat that we'd rather change the code.
I'm prepared to do that if everybody's done commenting.
Yeah, we can, anybody have any discussion on that?
I just had one
particular-
other discussion item.
Yes.
We have the requirement of either brick or stone. So would hardy board, which is a cement product, meet that definition, or would it have to be changed when we do the deep dive into the code?
That would require a change in the code, because the code is very specific, brick or stone.
Okay.
Okay, good discussion, good comments, I like this. Any other comments? Perfect. I'll entertain a motion on this item then.
Mr. Chairman, I move we forward a negative recommendation to the City Council for the design deviation request by the towns at Mountain View and remove the requirement of 50% brick or stone on the exterior building facade in favor of the other masonry products based on the following findings. The finding that we don't want to substantively do spot deviations. But also, obviously, the council is here, and I'm sure they understand they probably don't understand what I said, but we can work on that. The ordinance needs some looking at.
Okay, I've got a negative recommendation from Commissioner Sloan, more in positive of changing code and looking into the city code for bigger changes. Do I have a second on that?
I'll second.
A second from Commissioner Hammer. Missing you out, Jensen.
Okay.
Commissioner Hammer, how do you vote?
Aye.
Commissioner Proctor?
Aye.
Commissioner Sloan?
Aye.
Commissioner Dunn?
Aye.
Commissioner Jensen?
Aye.
Commissioner Goches?
Aye.
Commissioner Hamilton, I vote aye as well. This is a negative recommendation, looking to possibly change city code, going up to the city council for 7-0. All right, number 6 on our agenda tonight is a decision on a site plan design review request for the Slatewood Townhomes development by HMS Development LLC, proposed to be located at 1252 North, 680 West in the MR16 Multifamily Residential Zoning District. Mr. Agard.
Thank you, Commissioners. This site plan design review application involves the parcel highlighted in red on the aerial photograph. It's located in the Lexington Greens development at the intersection of 1300 North and 680 West. We have Lexington Green apartments being constructed to the east. There'll be some townhomes located to the south, and then some single-family residential to the north. The property is zoned MR16, as are the properties surrounding it, other than the properties to the north, which are zoned R17. The site plan application has been in the review process for nearly a year and a half with Tooele City. That's not because of staff. That is, the applicant chose to back off on their application for a while. They are ready now to move forward with it, and so that's why it's here before the Planning Commission for approval. This is the site plan as it is proposed. You'll note that the structures run east to west and face north and south, which is preferable for energy purposes and so forth, and it's actually encouraged by the code. The project will have 3 points of access, one onto 1300 North and 2 onto 680 West. All of the interior streets will be privately owned and maintained streets, And this is intended to be a rental development. This is not an owner-occupied development. So they're not doing any plating with it at this time. But all the structures and as they are shown on the site plan do meet or exceed the minimum setbacks, building separations and so forth as required by the code. This is the landscape plan. They are doing entirely dryscape other than the trees and the shrub beds as required by our city code. The only area of sod will be included in the child play area, which is located just north of the clubhouse. There'll be about 1,000 square feet of sod there for the children to fall on if they're playing on the structure. Everything else will be compliant with the city's code. Trees and shrub beds were all installed as required by the design standards. Staff did their best to confirm that. This is the elevation for the two-story structure, which will be rear-loaded, so the garages are on the back. The structure as proposed meets all the requirements for vertical articulation, horizontal articulation, and building exterior materials, plenty of stone on the front. They have not said anything about the amount of stone yet. Maybe they won't, but this is the back of the structure, showing the garage entrances and then the side of the structure. I believe 32 units are proposed to be the two-story. And then the rest of the units will be this three-story structure, which does meet the maximum building height of 35 feet. These are three-story structures and are front-loaded. They have very similar appearance to the two-story buildings, with plenty of stone and some board bat siding on the front, and then the rear facades have pop-out and bay windows and so forth, and then the side elevations. Staff is confident that the site plan as proposed meets or exceeds all of the design criteria as found in Tooele City Code 7-11A, as well as 7-4, the parking code. And we are recommending approval of the application with the basic housekeeping conditions listed in your staff report. And if you have any questions about the application, I'd be happy to answer them for you.
All right, let's bring this back to the commission for further questions. All right, hearing no questions, we'll entertain a motion on this one.
Mr. Chair, I'll make a motion.
Yes, Commissioner Jensen?
I move we approve the site plan design review request by Mark Holm representing HMS Development LLC for the Slatewood Townhomes Development application number P22-218 based on the findings and subject to the conditions listed in the staff report dated August 15th, 2023.
I have a motion to approve from Commissioner Jensen. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
And a second from Commissioner Dunn. Commissioner Hammer, how do you vote?
Aye.
Commissioner Proctor? Aye. Commissioner Sloan?
Aye.
Commissioner Dunn?
Aye.
Commissioner Jensen?
Aye.
Commissioner Goches?
Aye.
I am Chairman Hamilton. I also vote aye. That one passes 7-0. Moves us on to number 7 on our agenda tonight is the City Council reports.
Hello. Thank you for your awesome discussion tonight. Your discussion about the deviation from the design standards was pretty similar to ours, so I think we're on the same track there. Hopefully we can visit the ordinance again in the future. A couple of things from our meeting. We did change the zoning on the area on 3 o'clock drive where the Holiday Oil is proposed. We did change that zoning and we added the 2 acres to the north, so it's the whole piece. We also reassigned the land use designation at the former dentist office. I think you guys had it at your last meeting. And then we increased the fees for recycling from $5.65 a can to $7.18 a can. What's being collected just doesn't cover the cost of recycling. Recycling is very cyclical, so we're trying to average out and cover the cost. And then we adopted a tax rate and a budget for the year and spent a lot of money on roads and striping. So all good things, of course. Any questions?
Right, any questions for council?
I have a question.
Yes, Commissioner Hammer.
Recycling, does the city subsidize that, or does that new increase of $7?
$7, it's to $7.18, and it should cover the cost.
That'll cover the cost.
And then recycling was instituted in 2017, if I remember right. And is that right? Okay, good. And we said we need to probably look at that more often because each year they do a report, so they know what has been covered or hasn't been covered each year, but it just there hasn't been a study done to evaluate what we should charge because it's so up and down. So they did an actual study, Lewis, Young, Birmingham, and Roberts, maybe not in that order, did the study and suggested this would cover. And we talked about having that on a more having a study done on a more regular basis and actually reviewing that at the end of each year and evaluating so that we didn't come up against this again.
Thanks.
Good question. Any other questions for council?
Mr. Chair, I have a
Yes,
question.
Commissioner
Well,
Coates.
actually, it's just a comment
Okay.
to Anne Marie says that when the discussion was about restriping in the bicycle lanes and somebody made comment that nobody utilizes them, well, there are a few of us that utilize them, and it's an added safety measure. So, I want to encourage the city to continue to have the bicycle lanes because I use them.
I do too. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. Appreciate
Okay,
it, Ms. Mayhew.
thank you all.
All right, number 8 on our agenda here is a review and approval of Planning Commission minutes for the meeting held on August 9th, 2023. Were there any corrections or additions? All right, I'll entertain a motion.
I'll move we approve the minutes.
Motion to approve by Commissioner Jensen. The chair will second that one. Commissioner Hammer, how do you vote?
Aye.
Commissioner Proctor? Aye. Commissioner Sloan?
Aye.
Commissioner Dunn?
Aye.
Commissioner Jensen?
Aye.
Commissioner Goches?
Aye.
I am Chairman Hamilton. I also vote aye. Those pass. Moves us on to number 9 here is a discussion of Planning Commission training topics. Mr. Agard.
As the Planning Commission's well familiar with, you have to have 4 hours of training every year. One of those hours is just attending, I think it's 12 meetings per year. And then there's also some options to do some training on your own as well. But I just wanted to open up the discussion with the Planning Commission and see if there's some training topics that you would like to have staff bring back to you. Any kind of refreshers on anything, we'd be happy to take a look at those and do that for you. So what would you like to learn about? What would you? And I'm going to learn a lot too. So Jim always handled the trainings before, and so I'll be learning right along with you in regards to a lot of the details of what the Planning Commission does and how it does it.
Mm-hmm.
So.
I would like to see something about the city codes that we deal with, kind of how to reference through them and stuff. That they changed the website a little while ago, and I have a really hard time finding the stuff I used to be able to find pretty easily when I was trying to do my studying for our meetings.
So basically where they are, how to find them, or the codes that you need to reference in your responsibilities as a
Maybe
commissioner?
just like where they are and how to find them on the website, maybe,
Okay.
and then, but also just like a generalization of what they are and how they're organized would help me sift through it faster, I think.
We can do that.
A comment is that is what Commissioner Jensen said is that if it was hyperlinked, then you could click on it and then you could get to the code easier. So is that an option that we can hyperlink?
I don't know what a hyperlink is.
I think it could be.
We just click on it, it references the code, you click on it, and then it takes you to the
Talk
code.
to the council about a little bit of money.
Mr. Baker, did you have?
I can say it's a lot better today than it was when we first, because my office gave some feedback as well. There is no table of contents with hyperlinks, but with one click, you can expand every title, and then you can click on any chapter you want, and that expands the whole chapter. But what we could give to you is a kind of an index or a table of contents of the parts of the city code that you most often reference, so you could just kind of have that cheat sheet, as it were. That would be easy to put together.
It's a good idea. Yeah, make our jobs a little easier. Perfect. Anything else?
Mr. Chair, I've got a couple
Yes.
suggestions. I think it's always good to have a good refresher on the land use element, and I'm looking at items that are in our general plan. The general plan is a really good reference. I refer to it all the time, but I think additional training on that would be good. And then I'd also like to have additional training on parks, open space, and recreation. I just watched these developments come in, like this apartment complex that's coming in, that's going to be rentals, and the park element that they're going to add is a little tot lot, and they are going to add a common space, a community room. That's really nice, but I just don't see that as sufficient to accommodate that many people, the number of families and children that will be living there. I think they need more open space. I think it is going to really overcrowd our Parker's Park. We only have 2 fields there. So I'd like to know if we can have more influence over parks and participation with developers. So
I'd be happy to do a land use element presentation. I'm sure that Mr. Cook would be happy to do a parks master plan presentation. He's conveniently here tonight to hear that, so we can make that happen. And what else would you like to learn?
See what happens when you show up, Darwin, we put you to work. We appreciate you coming tonight. What else do we need tonight? Training on reminders. I think we've already done the conditional use permit this year, so we can hold off on that till next year, but that's always a good one.
I do have a question for the commission.
Yes.
Jim would always have training on every agenda. And sometimes that training can go on for quite a while, which make your meetings quite lengthy. Do you want that? Do you want training on every agenda, or maybe every other month? You only need 4 hours. What's the commission's take on that? How often do you want to have training on the agenda?
I think every meeting's a little overboard.
So maybe if we put it on the agenda once a month?
Once a month.
That way
or-
the people who maybe missed that meeting, they can still make their training quota by the end of the year?
We've got 11 things on there that would keep us to 11, but we've added.
You could also do 8 half-hour trainings. It's all cumulative. So
Exactly.
Yeah, Commissioner Sloan brought up a good point. If we had a heavy agenda, maybe have a decision, and if like I said, if you've got 10 or 11 items on here, we don't want to go into training too.
Or a
That's gonna
really
take
long
us all
public
night.
hearing that
Or, yeah.
Something dealing with 3 o'clock drive.
Anything to do where a public hearing is going to be a big one, yeah, maybe leave that in your hands to decide if it's going to be too much for us.
And if you're not comfortable with that, run it past your chair, he'll deal with it.
Yeah,
so
I
you
can help
don't
with it
have
too.
to.
Okay,
That's it.
that's good
Mike,
enough for me. That works.
You guys good with that? Any other training you can think of? If you think of any, of course, reach out to Andrew, let him know. This is important for us to continue to learn, and everything changes, so we got to keep up to date too. All right.
Okay, let me know if there's anything else you'd like to. In the meantime, I'll work on what we've got, and we'll get some more training for you.
Yes, Commissioner Sloan?
Andrew, I just had a thought. Did I interrupt?
Yes, Mr. Baker, go ahead.
Senate Bill 174 from the 23 legislative session requires us to rewrite our subdivision approval code. And Paul and Andrew and I are meeting to discuss how that's going to be. But I think our presentation to the Planning Commission about our ideas on that and the direction we're thinking of going, that should be legitimate training for them, so we could do that.
That would be a good discussion for us too, so.
Bump
yep.
that up to the top of the list.
Yeah, put that one at the top of the list.
Thank you, Roger. Commissioner Sloan?
Are we scheduled out for pre-development meetings?
I think,
Are we getting people to those? Are they taking place?
Yeah, when we have them.
Okay.
Yeah, they're not happening as often as they used to.
I knew we signed up early on at the beginning of the year, but I didn't know how deep into the year.
we came back again and revisited when Andrew took over as well,
Yeah,
and
I
I
think
think we're
we're-
signed up until
We
December.
were
aren't
good
we?
up through October.
October, okay.
Which means I didn't sign up for any of those, so if you need something, give me a call, because I can usually get for you through those.
And are we required to sign up for those, or are you just going to give us like a notice that there's going to be pre-development? Because I'm not getting that notice.
So
And I did when I
we
was on city council.
just had the commissioners each select a month that they wanted to do that, and then I just have a list to send a notice, or they include them with the with the packet when she sends it out, if they're signed up for that month. So,
Great discussions tonight. Good.
Thank
Any
you,
other-
Commissioners.
Thank you, Mr. Agard, appreciate it. All right, number 10 on our agenda, I will entertain a motion to adjourn. We are adjourned. Thank you, Commissioner Sloan.